Okay. All right, everybody. I'm Andy. You guys know me as fnook on DeviantArt.
And I'm Danny, and I would be known as Daemonysh on DeviantArt. Bet you didn't think it was pronounced Daemonysh. Everybody would probably think it would be Daemonysh or something.
That's what I thought at first, but we're not going to cover that.
Yes. Anyway, so, people have been asking for the longest time for, actually both of us to make some sort of tutorial videos.
Yeah.
Just covering our process.
Yeah, it's the #1 thing we're asked for, so we decided to put something together for everybody.
Yep, and in this case, I decided to do a cleanup job of one of fnook's drawings, which I absolutely love, and I'll just be going through the basic process. Now, these are the settings I like to work at. I usually like to work at a resolution of about 200 dpi minimum, just so that I can safely zoom in and zoom out. It looks better to me. And now I'm just setting up the drawing here. I like to work with a dark background, and I just changed my drawing layer to a multiply level, and I've just decreased the opacity so that I can see it as I'm doing the draw over, and just testing out my brushes here, making sure I have the right size. I usually like to work at about a size. What size is that? What size does that say?
No, we're looking at the video a lot smaller than we did a quick render of this, so we can't really see what we're
this isn't live commentary as I'm doing this, but yeah, I usually like to work at about a size 2 or size 3 standard thick to thin brush. But it's in every copy of Photoshop. And also, you'll notice that I'm actually rotating the canvas here, and I find that really helps with trying to get my lines more organic looking.
Yeah, this is something that I introduced Danny to back when I was using religiously Photoshop CS3. And the rotate canvas tool is something that your graphics card needs to support OpenGL, and it allows you to rotate the canvas in real time so that you can get that natural curve to your drawing hand. And it's just far more natural. It gives it a far more natural flow to your line as you're drawing. It's a really great tool if your graphics card supports it.
Yeah, so definitely if your graphics card supports it and you have a version of Photoshop CS3 and up, definitely give this a shot, because I guarantee you this is going to make your work a hell of a lot smoother. It's just, it's going to feel more natural. It's like taking a piece of paper and, rotating it as you draw, and everybody does that.
Yeah, when working with regular paper.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes drawing digitally almost the exact same thing as drawing paper. Pretty close to it.
Oh, I should also mention, I'm actually not using a tablet. I'm using my Asus EE slate to do this drawing in Photoshop. So essentially, it's a tablet PC. So it's again, it's like I'm drawing on paper, but it's totally digital, and there's no there's no cutoff from, how do I explain that?
No cutoff?
You know how when you do pen to tablet to screen, there's a disconnect, yes. So using the slate or a Cintiq is wonderful because you don't have that disconnect. So it's like transferring directly from your mind onto paper, and it's awesome. Yeah. Anyway, we'll probably cut that bit out.
Oh yeah, the discussion bit. Yeah.
You'll notice that when I do my line work, I'm actually very sketchy with it, and I tend to do a rough pass over top first. It's very, very light, but I don't try to go in and get the perfect line right off the bat. I like to... The idea is to build up your line gradually to make sure that you don't... just to get a more natural look.
Yeah, it allows you to draw really nice and light and thin, and then just you build up your line over time.
You build up your line, and you're also sculpting your line. So not only
That's the word I was groping for.
Yeah. So not only am I building up the line, but I'm also taking the eraser tool and I'm going in and just getting rid of bits of certain heaviness and And you'll also notice that I'm drawing through a lot of my other lines, so a lot of lines are intersecting. I'm going to be going back and making changes to that, but that just helps me sort of figure out where my lines should go. It's basic part of drawing anything.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. It's one of the things that a lot of artists do is, you know, we'll model a line, or we'll almost take practice swings at doing a line before we actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's very common. I see everybody do that.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to mention is what I'm doing right now is basically standard cleanup. So this isn't my drawing. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to capture the same spirit of the original sketch, but in a cleaner form. So this isn't the original sketch isn't my work. It's me trying to interpret the original work as a final design. This isn't necessarily what you would call tracing. There's an actual art form to it. It's not simply go in and just put a line over something. You have to really be able to analyze.
It's interpretation.
It's
really.
interpretation.
Yeah.
You have to be able to analyze what the intention of the original artist had, and you know you go from there. So it's a skill. Not very many people can actually do a solid cleanup job. Like there are things that I would even want to change on this. Like I'm happy with the final result, but you know there are things that I could improve.
That's common. I mean, everybody, once you finish something, you look at it about. You can look at it about 5 minutes later and just go, oh, I could have changed this, I could have changed that.
Yeah, that's an art. Yeah, that's the artist.
Never happy with it.
Never happy, perfectionism, you know, the usual. Okay, so I'm just checking my line work here. I hid the original sketch layer underneath just to see it. Now I'm going over my lines and I'm making changes as I go, darkening up certain things, and just basically trying to add more polish. And you know, I'm just checking and double checking the underlayer drawing as I go.
Well, you can also see when she zooms out, well, this is probably not the right time to say this, but you'll also see when she zooms out, there's a lot of inconsistency with the thickness of each line. Mm-hmm. That's basically because, you know, when you're zoomed in, you don't get a real sense of the overall thin versus thick lines. Mm-hmm. This is one of the reasons why we go in later and we'll tighten it up. We'll make lines thicker, thinner, just like embolden certain lines and sculpt it a little bit more, which, you know, at that point it's a lot easier because you've laid down the initial clean line that you want to use. Yeah. Yeah, so it really helps as you're working to zoom in, zoom out, even flop the drawing, actually. Yes, flopping the drawing is important.
That's more of a design thing, like when you're actually doing the rough sketch for a drawing, because you want to get your proportions right. When it comes to cleanup, you don't really have to worry about that, because technically you would have nailed that in your original drawing.
In the rough drawing, yeah. In the rough drawing, that's where you do the flopping to make sure that your drawing is, well, more or less consistent or balanced.
Yeah, but when it comes to the cleanup, definitely zoom in, zoom out. Don't be afraid to sculpt your lines with the eraser tool. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just, as I said, don't try to go in with a final line right away.
No, definitely don't. No, that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls and most common mistakes that new artists make is they get married to their final line. They go far too early into doing a final line when essentially they're just doing a clean version of a bad drawing, basically, is what it is. Mm-hmm. The rough stage, everybody really does need to start at a rough gestural stage where you can completely nail that pose, solidify that drawing, long before you even consider going into a final line.
Mm-hmm. And again, the final line is, you know, you play around with it as much as you play around with the initial drawing. Yeah,
and in the final line, once you have a solid rough drawing, you can go ahead and muck around with a final line because you have no worry of screwing up your original drawing.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a firm believer in your first inspiration or first impression of a particular drawing is often your best idea. But you know, you get into the trap of overworking certain drawings or certain aspect of a drawing, and you get further and further away from your original idea, and often you can completely ruin a drawing without even really, you know, because you hadn't made any plans. Before you know it, the drawing's ruined. And
then you just completely lose sight of what you were originally going for.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was fumbling to say.
So it's either you go back to the drawing board from scratch, or, you know, you have to struggle to kind of salvage what you'd already done.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that when I'm searching or scrounging for a certain idea while I'm drawing, I fill litter bins with just half-baked ideas and half-baked drawings. Like, I'll pull that piece of paper off the peg and then in the bin it goes, you know, just because it wasn't what I was after.
My sketchbook is full of half-baked doodles.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I don't actually like working a sketchbook, because it makes me feel like I should be married to every single page that I draw in it.
Yeah. I've lost count of the number of sketchbooks I've either just, I don't know, intentionally thrown out or intentionally lost.
Yeah.
You know, I just bought a new one. It's better to cut off that limb and just start from scratch.
Get a sketchbook that you can actually tear pages out of without ruining the binding.
Yeah, yeah. Sketchbooks are much better nowadays than they were ages ago. This is probably one of the reasons why, you know, buying those hardbound sketchbooks with the pages, you know, glued in and, you know, where you can't tear a sheet off is not entirely always the best idea.
No. But at the same time, it is kind of fun to crack those open, because it feels like you're popping the virginity of the sketchbook as you open it. It's like
popping that cherry.
It's like, oh yeah, okay, there we go, nice fresh pages.
I kind of do that in bookstores when I do pick up a nice hard copy of a book and I crack its spine just because I want to pop its cherry.
You're the first one to crack its spine. Oh my. Who'd have thought opening a brand new sketchbook or opening books could be slightly erotic?
Now everybody knows that I'm one of those creepy people in a Kohl's or Chapters or something like that. Oh, sorry, we're Canadian, so, you know, we don't have a lot of we have different book chains than you guys do in the States and whatnot in different parts of the world.
I have no idea what kind of book chains they have in the States.
I have a vague idea.
I'm assuming they have Chapters. Or is that a Canadian company?
I think Chapters actually might be a Canadian company. Oh. I'm not sure.
Let's edit that bit out.
Yeah. It's conversational. It seems complicated.
Good point. There was something I wanted to add. I can't remember what I was going to say. Shite.
Shite and onions.
Shite. Oh man, it's right on the tip of my tongue. So I was looking right at it, and then we got talking about books.
Hmm.
And my mind shifted.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Now I'm just, you know, erasing the intersecting bits. And
yeah, this is where you
continually rotating. I think at this point I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the collar of his shirt. Oh yes, now I remember what I was gonna say. I would highly recommend if you want to get better at doing your own cleanups. I would actually recommend trying to clean up another person's sketch. That way, it'll actually help you learn to interpret another drawing. You know, like
and adopt new styles.
And adopt new styles too. Like again, this isn't tracing.
Exactly. This is about the farthest you can get from tracing.
I mean, I'm sure you'll notice that I've taken some liberties with the original drawing. At the very end of it, I'm going to be showing the side-by-side comparison. You'll be able to see for yourself what the differences are in between the drawing. This is still, you know, it's based off of somebody else's drawing, but this is my interpretation of that drawing, therefore it is not tracing. Tracing is when you take something line by line. Tracing would be, as a horrible example that I've seen so many times over, is like taking a screen capture and just putting a line over it. Like you're not even interpreting the drawing at that point. You're just you know, line for lining it, and then going, "This is mine."
Yeah, yeah.
That's tracing. This is not tracing.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill. See, here you can see the cleanup versus the rough drawing, and as you can see, it's not a trace, because if you tried to trace a rough drawing, like the traditional sense of tracing, you wouldn't know which line to follow.
Exactly, and everybody's tracing would be different.
Yeah.
Because everybody would have a different interpretation. This is actually the kind of thing that traditional animators did back in the day, you know, working for Disney. Like they would, well, even now, I mean, cleanup artists, it's what they do.
Should probably talk about what you're doing right here.
Yeah, right now I'm putting in I'm basically filling in a base for when I add the color. I made a separate layer underneath the line. You'll notice that I actually labeled what my layers are, so I've got the line layer and the color layer. I add the base, just white, into basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to be locking that layer, and when I lock the layer, that means that any brush strokes I make on that layer are going to be confined to whatever paint I have
that already exists.
That already exists. Yeah. So I can go crazy and color outside of all of the lines. It's not going to matter. Everything else is going to stay inside of the lines. You'll
notice that on each layer there's a little checkerboard button that's called Lock Alpha, and when you use something like that, that means anything that is you can draw right over top of an alpha layer, and no paint will exist there, simply because there's no paint existing in a non-alpha area. I don't even know if that made sense.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
If we don't get more questions in the intro.
Yeah. But so basically, what we just clicked the lock alpha. So what you'll see is Danny will now be painting in the colored area, and she's perfectly free to go way beyond the borders of whatever she's already drawn.
By the way, actually what I'm doing right now is I made a separate layer on top of everything, and I'm just sort of marking out, just ever so subtly, I'm marking out areas of color that is like where it's going to end. So that way I'm not guessing when I add the colors. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like right there. That doesn't help because you can't see me point at the drawing. I think you get what I'm saying, though. I'm actually going to be deleting those lines later. It just helps let me know, like, basic guidelines for where I'm going to be putting certain colors. There we go.
Yeah, you just
I deleted it. Now
yeah.
I'm going in and I'm cleaning that up, giving it a nice shape. I do make several layers as I color different things, but for the most part I work on the main color layer.
Yeah, that's another thing that you really want to get used to doing, is work in layers. Probably one of the biggest frustrations I find seems to keep reoccurring with new artists when they're working digitally is they seem to not really want to work in layers. They prefer to work in only one single layer. That's probably one of the biggest frustrations, I think. Like, if I tried to work like that, it would be horrible.
It's a challenge, that's for sure. Like, I've seen people do full-scale digital paintings with just one layer, and they do an amazing job, but personally, I prefer to work in layers just because I know where everything is that way. And
it lets you play with it.
Yeah, it lets me play with it. It lets me change things that I don't like, change contrast, you know, hue, whatever, anything.
Speaking of contrast and hue, that's one of the really nice things about working digitally, is that once you have a drawing to the point where you can start adding tones, colors, and highlights and that sort of thing, working digitally really allows you to play with, like, once you've established contrast and tones, you can adjust the contrast and tone to something that's even stronger than what you had originally intended.
So if something doesn't look quite right against another color that you'd already laid out that you do like, you can go in and adjust.
Right.
as you see fit. And actually, you can see right here, I'm taking advantage of my locked layer, so I'm coloring outside of the lines, but none of that color is escaping.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say earlier, but did such a poor job of doing it.
No. It's, you know, it's quite difficult to explain this stuff.
Yeah. Especially when you can't point at the screen and people can't see you pointing at the screen.
You know, that would take extra editing, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to do that. I'm not that hardcore. Like, I really hope that people at least get something out of this video.
Me too. Oh, and for the record, Danny and I are not American. We're Canadian. What you're hearing is Canadian accents.
Have either of us said a boot? Because I certainly don't hear it. I don't think so.
No.
I had a friend in the States who was convinced that I was saying a boot, and it was really obnoxious.
Yeah. I was almost involved in a drunken brawl because someone Australian had insisted that I said a boot. That's something you don't do when you're sitting at a table full of Canadians who have been drinking. You don't do that.
Although, I have heard some Canadians say a boot, but those are more, it's a sort of a colloquial...
More of a...
but like, it's a very, not colloquial, that wasn't the word I was looking for.
It's more of an Eastern Canada thing.
Well, regional.
It's very regional.
Yeah, so, you know, it would be like saying all of the United States have the southern drawl.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm sorry, no,
yeah.
Y'all don't sound like that. Y'all don't sound like Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
Or, who else is a really annoying person on TV? No offense to fans of anything.
We don't watch a lot of TV.
No.
Outside of Discovery Channel, that's about it.
I like some educational television.
Yeah, and video games.
And video games. Yeah, you're gonna see I'm gonna go in and change that color a few times. I'm also going to be adding, starting to add some, like, shadows, or, some cell shading.
Ah, yes.
I'm gonna be adding some cell shading, and then I'm basically just gonna be experimenting.
Right.
To see what looks good. It's, you know, it's not gonna be something that I keep. And here I am, I'm going in, I'm just adding my own sort of little details. Again, this just shows, like, the interpretation involved in the cleanup process.
Often what happens when a rough drawing ends up going to cleanup, what ends up happening is you lose some of the original life that was in the rough drawing. That it takes an extremely skilled cleanup artist to be able to convey all of the life that was, I'm talking 100% of the life that was in the rough drawing into the cleanup. That takes somebody who with immense skill to be able to do that. But one of the things that what Danny's here is doing is she's adding these little embellishments that bring, technically the cleanup is done, but these little embellishments that she's doing on her cleanup drawing here is starting to bring forward some of the life that was in the original rough drawing. It certainly helps.
That's actually something that I learned very early on when I started my career in character design. My supervisor, you know, like, I do a rough pass on a design, and my supervisor would be like, nah, you know, maybe something more like this, and he'd give me a rough sketch. And, you know, me being the little green thing that I was when I first started out, and, you know, not very self-confident, I would just take that interpretation in the most blandest, you know, like, the safest way possible, like, just trying to get his exact, you know, his exact drawing, and he'd come back to me and go, oh, this is okay, but, you know, add something more to it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that's the one thing that, that's always stuck, that's one of the basic rules of I'm sure this carries over into just strictly drawing. You know, it's an animation rule, but it's a general drawing rule, is that every stage that continues on has to be better than the previous stage. So, for example, in animation, when you have storyboards, the layout drawings have to be better than the storyboards, and the drawings that are in the animation have to be better than the layout drawings, and so on and so forth. And you know, I'm sure that rule applies in pretty much every aspect of the drawing, professional drawing industry. It just rings true, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, here we go. You can see a lot of the little embellishments. So one of the things I really loved what you did here was the little cast shadow under the eye on the screen right there. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Underneath the eyebrow there, I thought that was a nice little embellishment that, you know, just wasn't there in my original drawing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that to give it some depth, because I found that you know, because he's got that eye patch on his screen left, and you know, that was cool, but it looked, I just found it looked a little flat without something to you know, give it some depth. You'll notice now I'm going in and I'm just experimenting with the colored lines.
Color line pass.
So
yeah.
I went into my line layer and I locked that, and I did the exact same thing that I did with my color layer, except I just picked a color and yeah.
And here we go. This is one of the things that one of the last stages I love doing is now tweaking with the contrast and hue, that sort of thing. It's so much fun to do. It's almost like a reward at the end of the the hard work that you did that you put into it. Personally, I never mess with the hue and saturation and contrast and all that until I'm done my drawing, because I want to use that as almost like this fun little reward at the end of hard work. It's
also faster because, you know, if you start messing with that stuff too early on, you're gonna get yourself stuck.
Oh yeah, you're gonna be distracted by it for sure.
So it's better to you know, do things in steps. Don't try to do everything all at once or too soon. And here I am. I'm just experimenting with the idea of adding some cell shading. I don't know why I have such a hard time saying cell shading. To me, it's like she sells seashells by the seashore.
It's a tongue twister.
So yeah, I made a separate layer to just draw in some rough guidelines to where I might want to put the shadows. It's not perfect, you know. I'm not really.
You didn't end up keeping this, did you?
No, I didn't. Like I said, it wasn't perfect, and I knew my light source and my sense of shadows could have been a lot better, but I just wanted to see what it looked like. So yeah, my shadows are always, you know, 100% black, but then I just change the opacity.
You can always change the opaqueness of the layer.
Yeah. And I mean, this is such basic shading.
Just trying stuff out.
Yeah. You know, it's nothing fancy. It's not, you know, trying to find specific colors for, you know, for shadows, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like trying to find contrasting colors and whatnot.
Experimenting.
Yeah. It's just having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
You know, in the end, it ended up making the video a lot longer than I had intended, but
get it a bash.
Yeah, you know, actually looking at it now, I kind of like it.
I actually kind of like it now that because this is, you know, I only saw this drawing in the final stage. I didn't see it while she was working on it, but now that I'm looking at it,
it's kind of cool.
It's kind of cool.
It kind of pops. But,
yeah.
You know what, I just figured it would be, sometimes it's better just to keep things simple.
Yeah.
You know, less is more, as they say.
Oh yeah, that's a solid rule.
That's another thing, that's another trap that I find a lot of new artists
fall professionals into. All kinds of professionals fall into those traps. It's a common thing. I mean, one of the other common traps is getting too close to your drawing. I've made that mistake so many times, where, you know, I just get to the point where, like, I'm so close to my project, so, you know, I know it so intimately that hearing someone else's input from a different direction it falls on deaf ears, and you know, like it's a common trap. I mean, especially if it's something that you brought up from the grassroots. It's so easy. It's such an easy trap to fall into.
You run the risk of becoming not open to different ideas. You know, like if somebody else has an opinion on how to make something that you did, you know, pop just that little bit more, you know, just give it that little bit of extra something. You don't want to not hear them out, because you might be missing out on a really good point that they make, and thus learning from somebody else's experience.
Yeah, I think the most common misconception for the original artist is thinking, oh, they don't get what I was trying to do with this. And that's so not the case.
It's learning to take constructive criticism. And you know, it's not criticism is usually considered a bad word. You know, criticism means, yeah, we're almost done.
Yeah, we're almost done. I'm sorry, I completely derailed you.
That's okay. Anyway, and this is pretty much the final look at things. Ta-da! Hope you enjoyed this video, because it was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, and I hope you guys look forward to us doing something more like this in the near future.
Yep.
Take care.
Ciao.
Thanks. And that's a wrap.
Yeah, good stuff.
I want to burp so badly into this microphone, but I can't.
Unfortunately, I lack the gas.
Yes, I'm lacking the gas, and we're so keeping that in.
I press this. And I press...